Look, you are where you need to be today. You are where humanity needs you to be today. Here in the streets in New York City, acting together with people across the country at more than 25 protests organized on September 5th to raise the demand, Trump, Pence, out now. That's Trump, Pence, out now. That's it, you got it. Now look around you. Look at the kinds of people who are here. Look at the diversity of people. Look at the fact that people have come from different parts of the world to be here in this country. We got some old folks like me and Jim who spoke earlier, and we got a lot of young people. We got differently gendered people. We've got a whole lot of diversity. We have to go out from here and build off of what's here and bring more of all kinds of people into the streets. Yeah. Because we have to drive this regime out. It is on us to do that. This is not a one-day show. We didn't call you out here to register that you don't like Donald Trump and then to go back home and wait to see what happened. We called you out here to be the beginning core of the force that is going to reach out to and enlist others, that's going to mobilize others, that's going to organize others to take up this 60 days of defiant resistance, to organize town halls, community speakouts, protests, all different forms, cultural events, to go through nodal points in September and to be the force in October that can bring people out into the streets day after day, night after night, in growing numbers, with the demand, Trump, Pence, out now. We have to bring people who have both been in the streets before, and over the 3.5 years of the Trump-Pence regime, there have been all kinds of people in the streets around all kinds of different issues. Well, we gotta bring them together. We gotta win people to see that whatever moved you into the streets then should bring you back out in the streets if you ain't still out in the streets. If you're still in the streets, keep you in the streets, but connect that to this demand, Trump, Pence, out now. We gotta do that because whatever progressive future you wanna see, if that's Black Lives Mattering and an end to white supremacy, if that's an end to the attacks on the environment, if that's an end to the indignities and attacks that LGBTQ people face, if that's an end to the attacks on women and their rights, like the right to choose to have an abortion or to have access to birth control, whatever it is, you ain't gonna achieve it if these fascists are able to cling to power. Yeah! So we gotta come together to drive them out. Because look, the first 3.5 years of the Trump-Pence regime has been a horror show from the very beginning. What will Trump-Pence 2 look like? Well, we have been getting a preview in the last couple of weeks. We saw the federal paramilitary agents sent into Portland to join the local police and National Guard in brutalizing protesters, but also to bring a different element, kidnapping protesters off the street, taking them into unmarked cars and to federal facilities where they interrogated them. That's a preview. We saw it in the attacks that Trump was making on and is making on voting. The post office moving post office boxes out of black and brown communities. Trump saying that if people get to vote by mail, it will be the most rigged election in history. so that if he loses, he can say, I refuse to accept these results. We saw the RNC, where on day one, they celebrated white supremacist, gun-toting thugs. Then, during day two of that convention, some of Trump's Second Amendment people were out in Kenosha. One of them murdered 2 protesters and seriously wounded another. And then was allowed to walk right through the police line, get in his car and drive back across the state lines. Now, Trump went to Kenosha just a few days ago, and he was talking about, we gotta do something about these outside agitators. He did not mean people like himself who went there to agitate racial division and to stoke up police violence and vigilante violence to subjugate black people and anybody who stood with them against the attacks that were coming down. He meant the protesters. He never mentioned this murderer who crossed the state line with an illegal gun and shot some people. That was not a problem. The problem was people stood up against police getting away with horrific acts like shooting Jacob Blake in the back 7 times. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that people protested. So all of this is coming together, and just in the last few days, the Department of Justice announced they're going to launch an investigation. Now, they're not going to investigate these white supremacist militias that are attacking people all across the country. That's not what they're going after. They're going to investigate the leaders of the Black Lives Matter protests. What are they saying? They are saying that if we're able to cling to power by hook or crook, we are not only gonna continue to escalate the attacks that people have been suffering, but also standing up and protesting against. We are gonna demonize and criminalize that resistance. We are gonna round up anybody that we identify as a leader of that resistance, and we're gonna wipe out the space for standing up against it. That is what we're facing, sisters and brothers. Now look, a lot of folks told us when we started Refuse Fascism, you are hyping shit up, but you're exaggerating. Things like what Hitler did in Germany can't happen here. This is a democratic country. Well, those people need to take their heads out of their asses. Where did Hitler go to study how to come up with laws and other practices to demonize Jewish people, to put them in concentration camps? No, he didn't go to Germany. He came to the United States. He looked at how the United States had subjugated black people, and he said, this is a good way to do it. But you gonna tell me that kind of shit can't happen here? It has already happened here. It is happening now. And it will happen in a much more horrific way in the immediate future if we don't act to stop it. Now, look, I've been laying out that we're up against a big thing and we got a big job to do in taking this on, but I also have to tell you, we got something going for us. We have got beauty and power on our side. You all out here today are beautiful. Even more beautiful was the upsurge of protest in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. That was beautiful and that was powerful. It was beautiful when the young people took to the streets around the environment. When people came out against the immigration ban and the concentration camps at the border, and when women took to the streets after the election of Donald Trump. We've got all that going for us, and we have to reach back to everybody who was in the streets, and to everybody whose heart was with the people in the streets, but didn't get in the streets then. And we have to organize them, mobilize them, and lead them back into the streets. Into the streets, starting now, in October, day after day, night after night, creating some facts on the ground that these fascists and everybody else has got to pay attention to and look at and calculate when they're trying to figure out How can we go about trying to cling to power? Can we cling to power? We have to do that, sisters and brothers. It is on us. And that's why Refuse Fascism has called for massive nonviolent protest, beginning in the thousands, going up to the hundreds of thousands, and ultimately the millions, showing the world that people here refuse to accept a fascist America, and that there's a growing section of people who are taking that stand. Now look, I gotta say a little bit about the actual election, the one in November. The first thing I have to say is, if there is an election in November, because Trump has already said he might have to cancel it or postpone it. You know, and I know people will say, oh, he can't do that. But that's what they said about the impeachment, the Mueller report, all the rest of it, and he did it. So we have to actually not assume this is going to happen. We have to create conditions, facts on the ground, people in the street that will not allow that to happen. When the election goes down, people have to vote against Trump, and that means voting for Biden. And I say that as a revolutionary communist who has never voted in any of their presidential elections. I haven't done that because it always struck me that these elections were not about deciding the future. Well, this time around, we think it's different, and there's a statement by the leader of the Revolutionary Communist Party, Bob Avakian, on the immediate critical situation, the urgent need to drive out the fascist Trump-Pence regime, voting in this election, and the fundamental need for revolution. I encourage people to go to the website revcom.us, get it and read it. Talk to people wearing this shirt, because we got copies of it out here. People need to read this and check out the orientation and understanding of Avakian's laying out. But see, here's the deal. We don't think Biden is any better than Trump. Now, a lot of people who refuse fascism think Biden might be the savior, might be more amenable to protest. We don't think that. In fact, Avakian says Biden's not better than Trump in any meaningful way, except that he's not Trump. Except that he's not part of a move to hammer the final nails of fascist rule in the coffin of democratic governance in this country. We can't allow that to happen, because our chances of doing anything progressive, whether that's making revolution, which is what we still believe and act on as what's necessary to end these horrors once and for all, but ending white supremacy, saving the environment, all the rest. You can't do that if we let this fascist regime cling to power again. So we have to take this approach, but not rely on these elections. Because he's already told you he's going to try to steal it, sabotage it, subvert it. He's told you if he loses, I'm not going to respect the results. So we have to be in the streets. We have to take up this call for refuse fascism, which is exactly what's needed. We have to act on it, building up through September, October, into the streets day after day and night after night, so that our force is something that everybody, friend and foe, has to calculate into their plans for whatever they have to do. Because that is the power that we have. That is the one that we must exercise. Be in the streets. See, and one last thing. The call for refuse fascism says the future is unwritten. What future we get is up to us. And that's very real, sisters and brothers. Whether or not we act will determine whether there's a fascist future in America or whether that future is stopped, beaten back, and the various progressive visions that we all have, some of which overlap, can be moved forward on and acted on without the interference of a fascist clampdown, which is something that would be horrific for humanity, especially in this country, the biggest superpower in the world. You don't want to have a fascist bully having his thumb on the nuclear trigger. So this is what it is. This is what we have to do. Now, today, a lot of people talk about, well, what did the Germans do? Why did they let Hitler get away with it? Well, if you look around here in America and see how long people have let our Hitler, the American version of Hitler, get away with shit, it begins to come forward to you how it happened in Germany. But let's flip the script, starting right now. No more standing aside. No more allowing people to stand aside and watch this going down and hope that it doesn't come down on them. Let's reach out, let's do all we can to enlist and mobilize people and lead them into the streets to stop a fascist America. Thank you, sisters and brothers.